Thanks, Simon. Welcome everybody to our Food Safety Friday today. As Simon said before, my name's Amanda Evans-Lara from Hassett Mentor, and I'm a food safety compliance specialist. And I've been working in this industry for over 30 years now. I've focused mainly in the training realm after spending many years, well, most of my career being auditing in the food safety space for BRCGS and SQF and FSSC 22000 as well. And now my focus a lot more now is more on training and delivering the new BRCGS Food 9 standard, which we started training for that yesterday, actually. So today we're going to go through and learn how to verify your food label claims. Now, the session is going to focus on learning about the different types of food label claims that are possible or what's around, and also, more importantly, the implications of what happens if you make untruthful claims. So I always like to give people who come onto these webinars some learning outcomes. So this is what I'm hoping that you will learn by the end of this session today. And we're going to start off with firstly defining what is a food label claim. Then we're going to move on to identifying the different types of claims that can be made on food labels. We're going to outline the implications of making untruthful claims, and we're going to finish up by giving a really easy 7-step process on how to actually go through and verify your food product claims. So hopefully that's what everybody's going to be interested in today, because that's what we're going to be covering. So let's start off firstly with what is a food label claim. So from my research, it was actually quite difficult to find an absolute definition for a food label claim. So my best description that I could come up with, merging from the research that I had done, is a mark that's applied to a food label, packaging, or associated advertising that asserts or declares that a particular attribute associated with that food is true. So even though we do talk about food labels, this could also include any advertising that goes with your product marketing. So whether it be ads on social media, whether it be advertisements on radio, in magazines, TV, anything like that. So that's where we're going to be looking around when we're talking about these food label claims. So for the sake of this presentation, let's call this my high-level definition, as we've got more granular definitions related to the different types of food product claims itself. So going through now, let's just start diving in. We'll just get to the meat of it and have a look at the different types of claims that are actually available, because there are lots and lots of different types of food product claims that can be made. And what you'll find is there are a lot of overlapping groups. So very loosely, product claims can be categorized as either nutritional content, they can be health-related claims made, they can relate to religious or philosophical aspects, ethical claims, food claims based on provenance, on assurance. We also have identity preserved claims and characteristic claims. So they're the groups that we're going to be going through. So we'll give a bit of an explanation on what each of those means and how it can affect you within your particular business. So our first one is our nutritional content claims. So nutritional content claims relate to individual nutrients in a particular food product. So these could be things like we've got the image there on the screen, low salt or lower sodium, could be low in fat, high in protein, good source of calcium, no added sugar, low carb or low carbohydrate, high protein. So anything that you would generally see related to what you would put in your nutrient information panel on your label is what we would call a nutritional content claim. So as a general rule, these type of claims are regulated within countries like where I'm from in Australia, also New Zealand, the US, Canada, Europe, and also the UK. So there are laws written around what you can and can't write around nutritional content claims as a general rule. Our next one is health-related claims. Now, these can be closely associated with nutritional content claims, but health-related claims, they go a bit deeper and they start associating a particular health benefit associated with consuming a particular type of food based on the nutrients in that food. So they link particular nutrients or a substance in a food with an effect of health or some type of serious disease or a biomarker of a serious disease. So some examples that you may have seen around are things like fibre keeps you regular, phytoesterols may reduce your blood cholesterol, adequate calcium and vitamin D as part of a healthful diet along with physical activity may reduce your risk of osteoporosis in later life. Omega-3s can help reduce your risk of hypertension. So we can see that they're more descriptive, but they're associating that if you eat this particular type of food, you're going to get this type of result. So like nutritional claims, health-related claims are also regulated by many countries globally. Our next type of claim we have got are our religious or philosophical claims. So these claims not only relate to people's religious adherence, but they also overlap into other personal or ethical values. So some examples of these could be kosher, halal, vegan, vegetarian, plant-based. I think plant-based is the latest and greatest one that we see everywhere now. Rather than vegetarian, they're actually calling it plant-based. So these are our religious and philosophical types of food claims. Now, these ones can also closely align to the next one, which is our ethical label claims as well. So ethical label claims are, or these type of claims are continuing to rise as manufacturers tap into meeting the needs, the values, the morals of their consumers. We've seen that research released by Euromonitor International shows that in North America and Western Europe, they're actually the largest ethical label markets in the world. So some examples of ethical claims can relate to human and animal fairness, like fair trade, as we can see with the coffee beans. We also have workforce labour issues and also sustainable palm oil claims, and even down to free range, whether it be free range chickens or free range eggs, things like that. Our next one is our provenance claims. Now, these ones you may be more aware of. So these particular claims are related to a particular country or a geographical region or place of origin. So they may be known also in wherever you're located, you may know them as country of origin statements. So there are, again, rules around provenance claims, and these are often embedded in food labelling legislation around the world. So some examples, we can have Atlantic salmon, being able to use certain words in your food descriptions. So champagne, cognac, Roquefort cheese, What else? We have a fair few in Australia around provenance. So if you're saying it comes from King Island, Maine lobster, they're some examples of provenance claims related to country and our, what do we say, country of origin. Our next one is our assurance-based claims. So again, we can see a little bit of a lap over with some of the other ones that we've spoken about already. But basically, an assurance claim refers to certain systems or processes that have been put in place to provide assurances to the consumer for their particular consumer group or their particular taste. So claims may have been substantiated through well-documented certification processes that have been performed by authorised persons. So examples of these could be Sustainably Caught, the Global Gap program, or any of our big certification programs. Again, cage-free, free-range, organic, because we do have some structured around organic, even though we'll see in a minute, organic can fit into another category as well. So these ones where you're basically assuring a particular attribute of your product. Our next one is our identity preserved. Now, if your company or your food business has certification to any of the GFSI recognised standards like BRCGS, SQF, FSC 22000, Global Gap, ones like that, you may be quite aware of identity preserved because this wording may be used in some of those standards. So identity preserved claims are, well, if we go with the BRCGS definition, they say it is the product which has a defined origin or purity characteristic, and that needs to be retained throughout the whole food chain. So through traceability and protection from contamination. So these could be labelling a product as organic or any of these type of free from claims. Gluten-free is probably a good example as well of this type of identity preserved claim. So many of the examples provided that I've gone through as well may also fit under this umbrella of identity preserved foods as well. We also have our characteristic-based claims. Now, these types of claims actually go in and imply a relationship with a particular standard. So these could be things like the food's pure, or it's fresh, or it's real, or genuine. When we start having those descriptors, like pure milk, fresh fruit, real or based on ice cream made with real milk, they're the type of things what we would call characteristic-based claims. And then our final group is process-based claims. Now, our process-based food labels refer to a particular process, preparation, or a production system related to the actual final product. So some of these examples, you can see we've got the GMO free or non-GMO. Could also be things like baked, not fried. So think about your processes within your business. Flame grilled is another one. Sun-dried, we see that with sun-dried tomatoes. If there's no artificial colours or flavours, they will fit into the process-based claims category. So just as a recap of the different types of claims that you can possibly make. So we had nutritional content. So I've got to, let's go back to that one. We've got health-related claims. We've got religious or philosophical claims, ethical, provenance, assurance, identity preserved, and characteristic. So now that we've got a better understanding of the types of claims that can be made, let's have a look at some examples of what happens when you make false and misleading claims on your food products. So as a general rule, if you do make misleading claims or false claims, you may find your business faced with some very, very hefty court action and financial impacts. And if it doesn't go to that court action, there may be just the advertising that goes, well, I shouldn't say advertising, the publicity that goes with being in that position of somebody making a legal action against your business, going out through social media. That can be more damaging to your business than actually receiving a fine through the court system. So let's have a look at some examples over the years of companies that have made false and misleading food product claims and what their outcome has actually been, what the impact has been on their business. So back in April 2009, we had the Kellogg company in the USA. So they actually agreed to a settlement of $4 million after they were charged by the US Federal Trade Commission with making false advertising claim on their frosted mini wheat cereal. So their claims stated that the product was clinically shown to improve kids' attentiveness by nearly 20%. So that's what we would call one of those health-related claims, because it's basically saying if you eat our product, you're going to get this outcome. We have a couple from Australia for those people who are on, anyone who's up at this time of the day with me. Back in 2013, we had a farm gate that was fined over $20,000 Australian after it made claims on its product packaging and also on their website, their business website, that their birds were range reared, when in fact what was found is that they were grown in commercial sheds and actually had no access to the outdoors. So it's a bit like that free range claim. We also had another chicken company within Australia, Biata, and they had made a similar claim stating that their birds were free to roam in large barns, and they ended up getting a 400,000 in civil penalties were ordered. They were ordered to pay that for this particular case of false and misleading advertising. We've got an example from over in Europe now. In Belgium, we had the Brussels court appeal had to decide whether the producer of soy milk product could use the name yogurt for their product in an advertising campaign that they had put up on Facebook. So the court ruled that the company was not able to name yogurt extensively because yogurt is exclusively used or reserved for cow milk products, and they wanted to use it for soy milk. So they were making like a soy milk yogurt. So the producer of the soy milk product was then found liable for misleading advertising and was enjoined from further using the name yogurt from soybeans. So again, if you think about the cost of that to that business, if you've gone through having to pay for all the packaging to get printed or any of the advertising, the campaign, surprisingly, it's not cheap to advertise through Facebook when you get your Facebook ads come up in front of you. So they had to basically take all of those ads down. We've got also, so they may not go to the court system, but there may be class actions, private class actions that go against food companies because of the claims that they're making. So we've got a more recent one here now. So back in June 2021, so last year, a class action complaint was lodged in the US District's Court in California regarding the sustainability representations made by a restaurant chain, which is Red Lobster. So they have this on their website. You can go ahead and actually jump on their website and see all of this, where the claim relates to the deceptive marketing and sale of Red Lobster's main lobster and their shrimp products as being sustainable. We're probably going to see a lot more of these potential claims come through as we're going down this more environmental claims. So they're saying it's sustainable when they may be sourced from suppliers that actually use environmentally harmful and humane practices. So part of this class action, they were saying that the reasonable consumers who see the Red Lobster sustainability representations, so they have this promise on their website, they have it on their menus in their restaurants, that they promise to provide sustainable seafood that's sourced from the highest standards. So you would expect that the products, if you saw a statement like that, you'd expect the products to be sourced sustainably and in accordance with those environmental and animal welfare standards. But in this case, there's been a lot of investigations done and they're saying it's not the case what's happening. And then we have another one from the US. Again, this is a December 2020 class action. So both the Red Lobster one and this one's still going through the courts, where the company Sargento, so they're one of the US's biggest producers in dairy cheese products. So it's been reported that Sargento is deceiving consumers into believing that products are made without the use of antibiotics, when there's been evidence to show that they are made from milk, which is coming from cows who have actually been treated with antibiotics. So that the products, the likelihood of them not containing antibiotics is not true. So they've done testing and found antibiotics to be in their products. So this claim that they're making is no antibiotics. And we can see this on, they've actually got quite a few claims on their packaging here. We've got their artificial flavours. We've got the no antibiotics we can see on the front there. So that's a couple of different labels from their products. So that's just a few examples of the implications of not getting this stuff right. So what we want to make sure is that whatever we put out there in the marketplace, whatever we're claiming, we can verify. So this is where we now get on to how do we actually verify that our food label claims are correct. So if you had to go to court or if somebody was questioning you, and sometimes it's not even just about one or two customers. It might end up starting off as one or two customers, but then the way that social media works, you get a lot of people on board. You have people who are interested in the same type of, say, ethical standards, and that's when things can then become class actions. People get on board and they don't agree with what you're doing, and that will then tend to highlight your product in front of the regulators, and then you'll also then end up having that action against you as well. So when we start looking at this food label verification of claims, we'll find that the majority of the certification standards will actually have requirements around the protection and verification of identity preserved food, which is what I mentioned before. So remember, if you've got BRC, SQF, ISO, FSSC 22000, things like that. So, but from a legal compliance perspective, it's also useful, obviously, to ensure that whatever you're putting out on your food label, it's been verified. So I'm just going to go through 7 steps method that I use with my clients, and also if you're doing any audit work, you can go through and audit your own labels within your business to make sure that you've got all your paperwork in order to verify that whatever claim that you make is actually true. And before we go into that, I will just make mention that a lot of the times the QA department get cut out of these decisions, because it will be the marketing department who make the decision, oh, let's put this on our product. And it's not until after the fact that the QA department, who the ones who get audited, actually see, oh, we've got this claim now we've got to verify, where did you get that from? So I think 2 departments sometimes in businesses can end up butting heads on this stuff. So let's have a look at our first step. So naturally, the first step to do is to actually get a copy of the food label. So get one straight off the production line. If it's on a roll, cut it off that. If it's a bag, if it's a can, whatever it is, just grab a copy of that actual food label. The other thing you want to do is also get a copy of the printed artwork. So the way that packaging works, if you're not aware, you would generally do up an artwork sample, which goes to the printers if you're doing external printing for your company, for them to print the label off. So grab a copy of that artwork and a copy of your food label as well. If you're printing labels on site, maybe you just have a little printer that you throw a sticker on, get information gets put on a sticker and you put it on the product. Again, print those out from your printer so you've got a copy of that label as well. Our next step is to actually identify what claims are on that particular label. So go through and review the label and just write out a list of what the different food label claims or food claims that are actually made on that particular label. So this is pretty straightforward. You can do yourself up a template or something like that and end up putting the copy of the label attached to it and then just a list of, okay, these are all the claims that are appearing on this particular label or this particular piece of packaging. Now you can do this same activity not with just the individual label, but have a look through your company's website. Have a look at any advertising collateral. Maybe there's in-store promotional boards. You can see copies of that just again to see what those claims are. And don't forget to include any outer packaging that, or what we call shippers, that the product goes in to the supermarkets if that's where you sell your product through. So we're going to review those items, the labels, and write out a list of all the different food label claims. Our next step, step 3, is to cross-reference. So depending on where you're located, I would definitely do research if you're not aware of any legislation or regulatory requirements associated with claims, because what you want to do is now go, okay, we've got a claim on this product of, let's say, preservative free. Now I'm going to try and have a look and do a little bit of research and reference against the legislation. Do we actually have legislation around those type of claims? Let's say it's our preservative free claim. Can we make those claims? What does that mean for that particular claim? So this step's really around helping you to make sure you're complying with the law as well. Now, when you go through this process, you also need to consider if you export your product to another country, you need to also consider the legal requirements in that country of where your product is going to be exported to. That's really, really important because they're the type of things that can get picked up at border control if you're going into, say, into the EU or into the US, or especially in Australasia, let's call it, New Zealand, Australia, your product will get picked up around your labelling issues. So you want to check just, are we allowed to make that claim? And also understanding if you are doing export, are the regulations similar? So for example, in Australia, if you make a gluten-free claim, the law is that you have no gluten, so 0 gluten. But the definition of gluten-free in the US is up to 20, I think it's 20 milligrams off the top of my head. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's around about that, but it's definitely not 0. Where I think as a consumer, you would think gluten-free means there is no gluten. But there's tolerances, let's say, in some countries on these free statements. So like I said, it's really important to just cross-reference against your relevant legislation. Okay, our next step, step 4, is to gather all that evidence that you've collected that backs up your claim. So evidence can include things like external testing. so if we go down this claim of, let's use the gluten-free claim, that you've got test reports that show that there is no gluten in the product. Maybe do your own in-house testing. If you're using an external testing body, you want to make sure that obviously that laboratory is reputable. They're using standard test methods if that's the avenue you're going to go down. You may collect your evidence around supply declarations. So your raw materials that are coming from your suppliers to go in to make your product, do they have declarations that say, okay, all our raw materials are gluten-free? And again, your own in-house testing results. So I wouldn't just rely on one piece of evidence. I would definitely gather multiple pieces of evidence. And this is quite easy when you're doing nutrient content claims. You may do your workout nutrition using a theoretical calculator. You may want to back this up with actual physical testing through an external laboratory as well. Our step 5 is, I just saw the comments there. Thanks, Elizabeth. It's 20 parts per million, not 20 milligrams. Let's go into our step 5, which is to now compare the evidence. So you want to get all that evidence that you've collected, compare it against your regulation, compare it against the actual label. So if you've got a test report, you want to see, okay, what does it actually say on our label? So for example, if you've made a claim of low carb or low carbohydrate or low fat, you would firstly find out what is the definition of low fat in your country of manufacture and also your country of supply. You would look and see, okay, how many grams of fat has been declared on your actual nutrition panel, and then you'd compare that again to the actual test results from the laboratory to see, okay, is everything lining up together? So making sure that you've got all of that stuff written out. So if you go back to, if you've done science at school where you had to write out all your methodology or your results, you're doing exactly the same here. So basically each label will have its own, say, group of documentation. And that's where we come to step 6, is around this whole documenting your findings. So you want to make sure that you record all of your results, all of your evidence, where you got your information from, where your references have come from, because not only do you need that to be able to show auditors or government or whoever what you've done or how you've verified, you'll want to be able to link to particular reference points, especially if there's websites or pieces of legislation as well. So make sure you document everything as part of that entire process. And then our final step is to basically rinse and repeat. So anytime you change your food label or the law changes or you change your raw materials, or if there's any advisory from any of your approved suppliers, if you're basing things on your raw materials, just go through the entire process again, just to make sure that your verification is current. So it's not a thing that you just do once and that's the end of it. You do need to have mechanisms in place that when you actually make updates, you go back and re-verify just to make sure that everything's still above board and you're allowed to make those claims. So they're the 7 steps of going through and doing your verification. So it was get a copy of the food label or the piece of advertising, identify any of the claims made on that label, cross-reference against any relevant legislation, gather your evidence that backs up your claim, compare that evidence against applicable laws, or if you're allowed to do it or not. And then step 6 is to go through and document those findings. And again, step 7, rinse and repeat. after you've made any changes to that label or your raw materials or advisory, or there's changes in the law. So that, just as a recap of what we've been through in this particular webinar, it's just fairly straight to the point, is we've looked at what the definition of a food label claim is. We've gone through and identified different types of claims that can be made on food labels, had a look at some implications of making untruthful claims and given some examples of some companies who haven't done the right thing. And we've also gone through and specified some methods to help you verify product claims in 7 easy steps. So Simon, that's for me. Thank you very much for that. And
okay, thanks Amanda, appreciate it.
So if you've got other questions after that we don't get to during the chat now, we can feel free to reach out to me at hazardmentor.com.
Yeah.
Or leave questions below the webinar that Simon will host in the IFSQ website. And I can come in there and answer.
We've got a few, so let's try and pick through those if we can. So one from Ahmed, thanks for your effort. Kindly, is it applicable if vegan or vegetarian on a label and they have cross contact with milk?
Well, again, this would be a matter of, are you, well, obviously, if it's milk coming from an animal, is there any residual there? Is it in the product? So this is where your testing is going to have to back that up. It's very hard, like I can't say whether it's right or it's wrong, because again, it depends on where you're located. But I would think ethically, I wouldn't want any contact with any meat product if wanting to eat a vegan or a vegetarian product, because that's what I expect as a consumer. And this is where you've got to put yourself in the shoes of your consumer.
Yeah. Question from Nekat. I would like to know current legislation in the world about vegan cheese. In Turkey, vegan cheese companies were fined due to misleading consumers' cheese name and because they are looking like dairy cheese. Also, there was a similar regulation in EU, but they withdrew it, I think. So do you know any current legislation about vegan cheese?
Not off the top of my head and like I said, globally, I can't keep on top of every single piece of legislation in different countries. But I did see something that it wasn't related to vegan cheese, though. Again, that would be one of those things if it has to be vegan. But if the question is around, can you use the word cheese associated with vegan? Because traditionally cheese has been associated with animal products. And we will see these cases around the world where people are saying, or governments are saying, you can't call that a cheese because that's associated with animal products. So I know in Australia and I think maybe the US as well, if there's anyone on from the US, when the whole meat, it's meat but it's not meat, like plant meat, nut meat, not being able to use the word meat associated with a vegan product. And that was more driven by the meat industry. We're saying, no, we don't want that word used. Yeah. So there have been cases, and they will pop up from time to time. Different countries will be having those conversations.
Okay. Question from Clee. I use the FDA food labeling guide. Do you have another source where labeling standards are laid out or diagrammed for reference?
Oh, absolutely. Canada, they've got good reference points. You just jump onto the government websites of major countries and you can download. They've all got labelling guides. They've all got claim of what you can and can't do. The UK, go to foodstandards.gov.uk. I think that's what their website is. Australian website, they've got the FISANS, we call it, foodstandards.gov.au. They've got lots of great labelling resources. Like I said, the US has got their labelling guide. So you will find all of the major first world countries will have that stuff. So it's just a matter of doing your research.
Okay, thank you. Samjana, is there any regulation regarding the use of certified logos on packaging, e.g. non-GMO?
Yes, there are. Again, it all comes back to whereabouts you're located. And this is where I'm not an expert in labelling laws all over the world, but go back to where you're located and jump on your Food Authority website and have a look to see what they say you can and can't do with your labelling. I think in this situation, Google is your friend. Okay, just put it into Google, your country.
Okay.
Yeah, there's definitely not non-GMO labelling requirements, and they will specify what defines non-GMO. I think that's maybe what people are looking for, especially when you start making health claims or nutrient claims. So what makes it allowed to say fat-free or low in sugar, low in salt?
Yeah.
Each country will have their own definitions for that, and they're not consistent across the world.
Yeah. So Samjana followed that up by saying they're in the process of getting certification, for non-GMO. So in the meantime, can they make that claim on the packaging, though they're going through the process? They're not actually certified yet.
Well, it depends what your level of comfort of risk is, I suppose, with your business. Again, and this is what we're talking about. You shouldn't be making claims on your packaging that you cannot verify. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Because if you can't verify, it's false and misleading. It doesn't get any more basic than that. If you can't verify that your product is what you say it is, do not put it on your packaging.
Yeah, sure. Question from Fahim. Allergen list, a worldwide allergen list. Do you know, is there a source for one? Obviously, different countries, regions have got their own.
There is. Now you're going to make me look it up. There is actually a really good site, and I will just quickly look it up and I'll drop it in the chat box for everybody. I actually used it in my training this morning with the BRC. So it's just, I can never remember what it is, so that's the only problem. Let me come back to you with that.
Okay. Yeah, we can include that on the discussion forum in the follow-up topic.
Yeah, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Question from Nadeem. How do we verify that product is really halal?
Again, you would have to go, if they've got the certification, to back that up. And again, it's how much trust do we put in that certification process as well. So if somebody said their product was halal, I'd be asking to see certification to support that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about the evidence, remember?
Okay. Question from, I think it's Oi. Does a product label claiming made from non-GMO ingredients require tests for every ingredient of the product? or is it acceptable to use risk assessment to justify exclusion for testing some ingredients?
Again, this would be very much based on what your food law in your country requires you to do. Okay, just think about the intent of all of this. If you're going to make that non-GMO product claim, you have to be able to support it. And if you have to support it with every single product being tested, so be it. You can do risk assessments till the cows come home, but you need to actually have hard scientific evidence that it has it in it or it doesn't have it in it.
Okay. Question from Anastasia. When claiming vitamins or minerals, is it about the existing vitamins or only the vitamins that are added on purpose?
On purpose. Again, I'll keep coming back. You need to have a look at your legislation in your actual country, because vitamins and minerals are very different things, because you're going to have transformations happen during processing for vitamins. So, for example, here in Australia, we have to add thiamine and folate to bread, and that has to be at a certain level. So that gets added in. So you'll test the bread product, and it will come to us, you do the testing for those particular vitamins to see whether it's meeting those levels.
Okay, question
So
from...
just remember that the outcome is, if you say a product has got X amount of vitamins in it, or increased vitamin A or something like that, number one, what's the definition of increased? Are you allowed to use the word increased vitamin A in your content labeling? That's the first thing. By law, are you allowed to say that? And then you do your testing to support, are you meeting what the law says you can write?
Okay.
I put the that web address in there too.
Right, brilliant.
I just found it, so I'll put it. I just dropped it again now.
Thanks a lot. Question from Nika. If a company manufactures packaged product for internal use only for their internal customers, do they have to label them with allergens, etc.?
Again, comes back to where you're located. We have rules in Australia that even intercompany transfer product, you still have to have allergens labelled.
Yeah.
Okay, but allergens are having to label allergens we're not talking about that in this webinar. It's different to making a claim about an allergen, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Steve, is there a global shift to get away from may contain statements on packaging? So is that what you see?
Yes, I'm definitely seeing that, because we have traditionally seen, and again, this webinar is about claims as opposed to, we normally see the may contain statements associated with allergens, and it also may be with certain ingredients. So in your ingredient listing, again, if you make blanket statements to try and avoid certain population groups eating your product because you don't want the liability, there may be rules in your country of manufacture and sale that prohibit that from happening. Again, you've got to do the verification, and allergens is a good example of that. It's not mandatory in Australia at the moment, but there is a push. You just can't write, you make corn, but then you start writing may contain peanuts, tree nuts, and all the allergens just to try and cover your liability.
Yeah, it's not helpful.
No, not at all. Because what are people who suffer from allergens, or what are they supposed to eat if all food companies start making these blanket statements?
Exactly.
There'd be no food for them to eat.
Okay. Question from Muyanja. do you think manufacturers labeling their products natural, 100% natural, no added sugar, 100% pure, are misleading consumers in one way or another?
They are if they're false. Absolutely. Because it
Yeah.
comes back to the definition of what defines natural, what defines no added sugar. So this again, you've got to go back to your government authorities and your legislation to see what are the definition of these things. I know pure is one of those words that very few countries in the world have a definition for pure. Some countries used to have it. It's been taken out of their legislation. So you will find marketers, they'll go for any angle they can to try and get that upper edge in the consumer's eyes. But I think as a consumer, when I see that, I'm asking questions. Okay, natural. What's your definition of natural? Natural to me, it hasn't been processed at all. And it's me picking an apple off a tree. But then to someone else, they might go, well, that's not really natural because it's been processed with pesticides. Pesticides have been used in the growing process. So it's having a really clear definition around those particular words. And unless the consumer knows that clear definition, this is where they tend to get sucked in, let's say, with believing that a product is what it states it is, but it's not really. Again, it's misleading.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, obviously, you've got to understand the rules in your country and also where, if you're exporting, the rules
Yeah,
there as well.
your country of manufacture and your
Yeah.
country of sale.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then anything you've got to comply with that and state that, and anything that you do state, you've got to prove it by testing.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's very difficult to ask generic country-specific questions because that's the overarching guidance, and you've got to have a good understanding of the food, the technological aspects of your products.
That's the other side of it too, is knowing how your product's made and what gets put into things. And again, even like you start getting into this whole other area of health claims and the associations, it's like what studies, what research has been done to say, foods that contain phytoestrogen reduces cholesterol. Where's the research? Was it a sample size of 10 people, or was it a sample size of 200,000 people in the study when they came up with this stuff? And you will hear just about every day that there'll be a claim on, if you drink 2 cups of coffee a day, you're going to reduce your risk of obesity when you're over 60, or just weird and wonderful things like that. As a consumer, and this is where the power is with the consumer, is to push back and ask, well, how did you work that out? Where did you get that from? I want to know how you worked that out before I start investing in having to drink 2 cups of coffee a day.
And I guess in a business, marketing love to be able to make claims like that.
Absolutely, they do.
Give them an
I think they wake up in the morning and think, what new thing can I make the QA department, or challenge the QA department, saying, can we put this on our label? And the QA department goes, no, we can't. Well, can we put this on our label? It's like, no, you can't put that on your label. Oh, what about this? What about natural? Let's call it natural, or let's call it. I see everybody's putting organic on things, so let's put organic. And the problem with this stuff too, especially with organic, is when you start putting those things on labels, there's an expectation that they're more valuable to the consumer. Hence, they're going to be sold at a higher price point.
Yeah.
So we're starting to now, all of this stuff goes into our food fraud area. So it's deception.
Yeah. 100%. I think I'm just going to take a couple more questions, but I understand it's 2 a.m. For you now, so we're not going to go on
Yes.
too long.
Love to stay up and chat.
Question from Zach. Where there are no specific guidelines, is there a minimum percentage required in order to make a geographical claim with a product with multiple ingredients?
Again,
quite complex.
Very complex, and it's not a question, sorry, Zach, that I can answer. Because, yeah, again, you've got to find a definition. And I know you're saying that if there's no guidelines, you're basically saying if there's no guidelines, we can just make it up.
Yeah.
But again, it's going to be tested in court of what the average, a lot of court rules around what the average person perceives and believes. Would the average consumer accept that? So if you said, 22.2% comes from, blah, blah, blah. In Australia, we have country of origin labelling laws that you have to actually put on your label. You can't say Australian made or made in Australia. You have to actually write made in Australia from X amount, and you've got to actually write the percentage of imported ingredients or local import. If you're going for this claim of buy local, source local, grow local, that type of thing, you've just got to be able to back everything up. That's what it comes down to. You've got to be able to back up everything that you say.
Yeah. Okay, final question then from Jaleesa. So we talked about understanding and the rules and testing. So if you do test products and make claims, how often should you retest?
So as a general rule of thumb, you'll find that a lot of the GFSI standards, so we're talking if you're certified, BRCGS, SQF, FSC 22000. And remember, you can go and download these standards for free from those websites to see what they're writing. But generally, they'll say 12 monthly or at least annually, at a minimum annually. But then they'll also stipulate when there's changes to ingredients, to process, to to whatever has resulted in you wanting to make that particular claim.
Okay.
So again, all of that stuff's available for free. Just jump on those websites. If your business is not certified to any of those standards, you can still get the standards and use those as a guideline to get your business up and running in that space.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that's a wrap. So thanks very much for your time, Amanda. I do appreciate it.
Thanks,
I know it's
Simon.
very late. Good night.
Good morning. That's what it is now. No, Simon, I'm always happy to come and do these webinars as much as we can help the industry. I'm happy to do that. Doesn't matter what time of the day it is. So it's all good.
I do appreciate it. So thanks very much, Amanda.